Have you ever felt like you're on the precipice of understanding something truly profound about yourself, yet it remains just out of reach? That's where Jeffrey Brunk comes in, a shamanic healer, Usui Reiki master, and spiritual counselor who will share his wisdom and understanding of the delicate balance of light and shadow. Explore the unseen realms with Jeffrey as your guide, one who has traversed these paths, facing his own wounds to emerge as an everyday shaman. Jeffrey's journey through shamanic practice, shadow work, and energy healing unveils the intricate ways in which these forces shape our physical, spiritual, and emotional well-being. Whether you're taking the initial steps towards inner betterment or you're further along on your path, there is something within this podcast that will resonate with you. Delve into the essence of what it means to navigate life's challenges with an everyday shaman's insight and discover the joy and purpose that can be found even in chaos. Join the Everyday Shaman in an extraordinary journey in which we will explore topics that could very well change the way you perceive the dance of light and shadow in your life and the world around you. A journey to greater self-awareness and the unseen world around us. Welcome to the Everyday Shaman.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Everyday Shaman. I'm your host, Jeffrey Brunk, and I thank you for joining me today. I hope everyone is doing well out there listening, but truthfully, I know that there are those listening that aren't having such a great day, week, month, or year, and that is a big part of the reason that I began this podcast, to reach as many people possible, provide betterment, even if it's through just a few words that are said. If something's gleaned from a conversation with a guest or something that I say, then this whole venture has been worth it and will continue to be worth it. So thank you for joining me. I have some great guests that are going to be on the show in the next several weeks, some of whom are clients and others who are not. This is not your typical shamanism, shamanic podcast because there are so many out there. I don't want to be another this is how you do things, and this is how they have done things in the past, and other people do it. And because there's no one way, actually, the only thing that is necessary that it's in common with all of these modalities, be it shamanism and energy healing, is intention. So keep that in mind. I will say that shamanism, the practice, has been around for 10,000 plus years. And you think of medicine men in Native American cultures and ayahuasca retreats in the Amazon. But really, shamanism is a way or a method of connecting to everything. Everything in the seen world, everything in the unseen world, and bringing it all together to provide healing and insight and connection to the earth and the universe. It sounds kind of far out, groovy, man. It is a little bit. When I first learned about it, I wrote my memoir and didn't want to write the last chapter because people think I'm crazy because of the things that I've seen and who I have encountered. So I'm not going to get into me. If you want to learn more about my journey, I'm going to talk about it at some point a little bit here and there throughout different episodes, but it's in my memoir, so I do have a guest that lived with me throughout that time of my life where I fought with shaman sickness and call it the dark night of the soul, but that's not what I want to talk about. I want to talk about something more relevant, and that is that those that are searching and those that are wanting something more to fill the void. And it's almost cliche to say that, and you hear it all the time, but it's true. It's something always missing. And you see the divisiveness in this world today. War has been forever going on. And I'm going to tell you right now, peace on earth will never happen as long as humans are here. And that is because there is a battle going on in the unseen realms between light and dark, mostly shadow. And as humans, we are bearers of shadow, or the divine shadow, light and dark together. There is an imbalance right now within people, within nature, within the universe, within relationships. It affects everyone differently, and it comes down to choices that we make as to how it affects us. With the old adage about the butterfly flapping its wings on one side of the earth can cause a hurricane on the other, It's really true. I never understood that for a long time until I understood how powerful energy is and frequency and vibration and how ripples of these things can affect so many other aspects of not just nature, but thought, actions, and words, and even down to typing a letter. The energy in that comes through. It's within everything. Energy is inherent in every single thing. It's what we are made of. It's what mass is made of. It's what sound is made of. It's constantly moving. So I want to talk about shadow and light and the imbalance. But what I also want to do, and I've said that I would, in my debut episode, that I was going to be reading some summaries. Now, one thing I want to make clear is that these journey summaries that I undertook for myself, these aren't journeys that I would take for myself, be it for a physical issue or an emotional issue or whatever. These are ones I was guided and led to share with a mass audience because the sacred space, the shadow, the darkness, these are the things within this world and within ourselves that need to be addressed by every single individual. And so the messages that I received, be it through imagery or through actual being spoken word or the animals or whatever it may be that were in there, there are things within each journey that will resonate with anyone who is open and willing to listen for those messages that are meant for them, if that makes sense. And for those that are not ready to listen yet, that is fine. I just have to hope that the messages that are conveyed through me to you with the ripple effect trickle down to others and in some way at some time get through to these people because of the dire imbalance that is within each of us, within the world, not just individually, but collectively. I wanted to make that clear, and I hope it is clear. What I want to do is discuss a little bit or to tell you a little bit about how I go about shamanic journeying. Now, you hear that a lot too. A lot of these words I'm using, I hate to use because they're almost buzzwords. And having been in business for years prior to where I am now. But shamanic journeying, there are certain ways. Some people claim to shamanic journey or can shamanic journey using psychedelics. You hear about ayahuasca. I am not advocating these things because they're not necessary. Others, like myself, use drumming. Personally, I have a drum, but I use a drumming track with headphones set to somewhere between 200 and 200 and 210 probably beats per minute to get me into a state of using breathing techniques as well, to get me into a state where part of me leaves my physical self and travels to where I need to go for an individual or for a situation. And what I find there is never the same. And I tell people that I work for to have no expectations about what may come from a journey, because when I am finished with a journey for someone, I write a lot of notes, and then I do a very, very detailed summary of that journey for that person. And I do that because the summary has as much healing information in it as what is done within the journey itself. Now, when I first started journeying, and I was kind of a newbie, this was back when I still had the size 12 boot in the keister, or right afterwards, people would ask, hey, journey for me and find my spirit animal. It was almost like a parlor trick type thing. And it's not a parlor trick. I'm sorry. I shouldn't say that. It was almost like a fun thing. And by the way, people have reached out to me and said, I'd like a reading. I don't do readings. Can't do the future. The future is not set. I don't know what's going to happen in the next 10 seconds because every choice we make affects what happens in the future. There is no set, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, because choices that we make on a daily or a momentary, every choice we make, mentally or verbally, changes the course of the future. And it also changes for good or for bad. And that's where shadow and light come in the mix of those two. So what I'm going to do is I want to describe when I journey what I first encounter. And from the beginning, and I will tell you that I read a book on shamanic journeying by Sandra Ingerman way back a long time ago, back when the book came with a CD with drumming tracks on it, and was able to journey the very first time I tried. And within there were suggestions about finding a sacred space. A sacred space could be anywhere you felt safe, anywhere that brought comfort. I had my space, and it remained a constant for me in every journey that I had ever undertaken up until recently. I would enter it through my childhood home kitchen doorway, going outside, crossing a threshold, and stepping onto a stone slab. I'd see a little bit of land. Sometimes it would be grass. Sometimes it would change depending on the journey, but it was always the same layout. And between there and a very large tree was a stream, and the stream could be different each journey as far as the water depth, the color or the clarity of the water, how deep it is. The tree's leaves could be different, but the tree acted as a portal to the higher realms and the lower realms and this realm, which I call the now. Behind the tree, there was a large, vast expanse of field, a lot of times filled with different types of sunflower or different types of flowers, sunflowers, a mountain behind that, and that is where the stream would originate, and a small quartz beach where I would stand and be greeted. And at first I was greeted by my grandmother and very early on, but most often greeted by what I call divine essences. Others would refer to them as angels. I don't like using that word because if you think of angels, most people think of winged beings that are brightly colored or little cherubs that are shooting arrows, and that is not the case. And they are not grotesque and causing fear either. They each have a color attribute to them. They each have a feel to them as far as what they emanate. And when I started journeying, one of the very first essences that I encountered was Raphael. Even having grown up in the church and all, I knew very, very little about the angels. I knew there were very few in the Bible mentioned. Most of the ones that I've encountered in my journeys since that time, I would get names. I would get names and take them phonetically in my mind. And I would ask Jibrail or Gabriel to help me to remember. And then I would look up these names. Oh, and let me say this. I also speak to Yeshua quite frequently. And that started, 10 years ago. And if you don't know, Yeshua is who others would call Jesus. Not the Jesus of the Bible, not anything at all remotely like the Jesus of the Bible, except for the warmth and compassion. And it's such a warmth. I go on journeys in Yeshua and I don't want to come back. So if someone is out there saying, oh, he talks to Jesus, oh, what a crock. Well, anyone that's ever said a prayer, and in this country, in America at least, gone to a church and prayed and asked for forgiveness, has prayed and talked to Jesus and says they do, so we don't want to go there with that argument. But what I want to do is read a summary of a journey of mine, and I'm going to do these in 3 parts because of the imbalance between light and dark and shadow. And one way that I like to describe shadow is I use the yin-yang symbol as an example, a visual example. You have light on one side, dark on the other, but in between where those two meet, that is the shadow, shades of gray. And when that is out of balance, it throws the white out of balance. It throws the dark out of balance. And it throws us as humans out of balance when our shadow is not in tune with nature, not in tune with ourselves, when we are searching, when we are lost and feel stuck, or we're frustrated, or we're angry, whatever it may be. The light, the divine, never lies to us. The shadow tricks us. And this world is a shadowy place. And when I say the world is a shadowy place, right now within our culture, within society, worldwide, there is such division. Everyone is offended by something. Everyone needs to feel like they are validated, like they are right. This is not about anything other than what honestly all humans feel. And there is such hatred and such division and such exclusion. People go hungry, but other people build rocket ships shaped like phalluses, and spend their money on that instead of helping those in need. It's an imbalance to that degree. I'm not saying that it's wrong to have money, but I'm saying it's wrong if you have so much and you don't do good with it. So what I want to do, not long ago I journeyed because I was actually searching myself, and we all do. Even though I've come a long way since the days of looking for power animals, I reach places every now and then where I go, is this it? What more can I do? And I hate it when that happens, and I know that it will change. But I was asking, what is my purpose now? Because purpose changes as you go down your path. You get to one place that you're meant to be, and then the road splits or forks into 3 or 4 different ways maybe, and you pick another path. And that one takes you to another place along your journey. And so I reached a place like that not too long ago, and I journeyed about it. And I want to read the summary that I wrote. There are 3 in total, but I want to read this one first because it's about my sacred space that I spoke about earlier. And keep in mind, my sacred space had been the same for 15 years. There are aspects of it that would change. Again, like I said, depending on the person and situation. So this changed recently, and I want to read the journey, and I'll begin now. When the journey began, meaning using the drumming track, still at 200 BPM, I was almost immediately whisked away to my sacred space. When I arrived, I didn't cross the threshold of the door as I normally do. I found myself standing on a stone, but it wasn't the usual stone slab. This stone was brilliantly colored red picture jasper. The red was adorned with flourishes of pink and white and thin streaks of gray that branched off in various directions. I heard a voice saying, "Do not turn around, do not look back, there is no doorway. This is your space. Until now, your sacred space has been a place that you created. Now you will learn what is true." So that voice was the voice of Yeshua, standing to my right, and to my left was Jibrail. And Gabriel extended his right arm, raising it slightly with his palm turned upward, and uttered one brief sentence, the sacred space, the hand up, basically at heart level. I looked ahead and I lifted my head slightly. My view was then spun all directions. Left to right, top to bottom. It's kind of like watching a gyroscope and seeing every angle. The picture jasper angled upward slightly, leveling off to a flat landing. Atop the landing, there appeared to be a thick, clear, long bench. This is when the gyroscopic viewpoints began. What I saw was not a clear bench, but a horizontally set, flawless, thick crystal that was pointed on either end. On the back of this crystal was another crystal, also flawless. This one was also pointed on both ends, but it wasn't as thick as the one that was horizontal. These two weren't separate crystals, but were one solid form. And from the front view, there were 2 more longer, narrower, double-terminated crystals, also part of the same form. These formed an X shape that passed upwards through the thick horizontal quartz and crossed when they passed through the vertical crystal. The entire crystalline form seemed to be hovering a few inches above the jasper landing. It was when I noticed this that I was both pulled closer to the crystalline form and then above it. And from above, I was able to see that underneath the crystalline form was a circular form that rotated in a clockwise motion. This circular form was also crystal clear, but around the edge of the form there were small, multifaceted amethyst and emerald stones. Also from above, I could see that the tops of the vertical and X-shaped crystals were also clear quartz interspersed with citrine. The entirety of the crystalline structure resembled a widened chair of sorts. After seeing the details of that structure, Yeshua spoke again, saying, "Your true sacred space is within, not a destination. Wherever you go, whatever you do, you carry that sacred space and can be within that space at any time you choose to be." Now, after he said this, I turned to him and I asked, "I understand, but how does this explain my purpose for being?" He stood silent and looked right at me with a embracing warmness. I continued to say by saying, "I'm grateful for the ones I've helped. I'm grateful for the gifts and the blessings. I'm extremely thankful for the lessons I've been given, both good and bad. And I'm very grateful for the knowledge that's been shared with me, but I'm at an impasse. What more is there for me to do? And if there is more, what is it?" And he continued looking at me, still silent, like he was waiting for me to continue, so I began to speak. "I don't feel," and it dropped off, and it was Gabriel who stopped me from speaking after the word feel. "Have you learned nothing?" he asked. Gotta say here, this is not in the journey, but I'm just saying Gabriel is he has more of a stern presence. Not scary, he's just stern. He said, "Have you learned nothing?" And his tone was stern, and as usually is, but this time there was a slight difference, almost like a mocking or dismissiveness in the voice. "What is a feeling?" he asked. "Is a feeling a belief? Is a feeling an opinion? Is a feeling a creation of the mind? Is a feeling undeniably always true?" This was in a tone that summed up Gabriel's overall message. It was direct, spoke to me with the bluntness of a frickin' rubber mallet, the mallet being Gabriel in a way. Yeshua then spoke again, and his tone was more subtle, which he is very much more subtle. He said, "Go, ascend to the crystal, look down, and follow the pattern within the jasper. but don't look back. When you have reached the crystal, continue looking down at the pattern within the stone, following the pattern until it converges. Then sit upon the crystal, raise your head, look forward, then look to the left, then the right. Jibrail and I shall remain here, but do not look back should we speak. So this was a very specific and cryptic directive, even by Yeshua standards. However, I don't question Yeshua's directive, and I immediately looked down at the picture jasper and followed the streak pattern and ascended to the crystal. When I had reached the crystal, I sat down and placed my back against the vertical crystal that acted like a backrest, sort of. I then raised my head and looked directly ahead of me. I turned to the left, turned to the right. On either side, both left and right, was a vast expanse of coastline. There were identical, narrow, rolling dunes on either side. Directly in front of me was a break in the dunes, kind of like a walkway down to a shoreline, and blue-green expanse of water ahead. However, there were no footsteps or disturbances in the sand or the dunes, nor was there any seagrass, seashells, etc. On either side, the dunes faded into obscurity. It was that long of an expanse on either side. It was very bright. Another familiar voice spoke, saying, "You've been here many times." And this was Raphael, although I didn't see him in form. Sometimes I just know by the feel of the presence, sometimes in colors, sometimes just hearing the voice telepathically. "What do you see?" Which is a typical Raphael question, by the way. What do you see? What do you see? So I looked out into the distance at the water/ocean/sea because it was hard to tell what it was. It was vast, but the colors were different. It definitely looked like the ocean, but there was a lot going on in the scene. And the first thing that was noticeable was that there weren't any breakers or water rolling in onto the coastline. It was an ocean without a tide. Then Raphael asked, "Tell me what you do not see." So having been in this scenario before, and I'll say that he is associated with water and a lot of journeys are on the beach, I said, "I don't see the things beneath the water. I don't see the threats, the current, the animal life. I know those things are there, but I don't see them." Raphael replied, "You're mistaken. How many times have you been beneath the water?" This response took me off guard, but also contained a lot of truth. He continued, "Now look ahead and watch. Think of this as a test." I shifted my focus to the open area between the opposing dunes, not knowing what I might see or where. I moved my focus from the shoreline to the water, scanned from front to back, side to side, and it only took a moment before I began noticing various things, all seemingly unrelated. The first thing that became noticeable was that in 5 different places on the water surface, the water began to vibrate in circular motion, causing ripples to form, but not waves, and not crests. The water's movement began to become more violent in each of the 5 areas. The areas that I was seeing, they were in varying distances from each other and from the shoreline. Although the vibrations caused ripples which grew larger as they expanded outward and intersected with the ripples caused by each of the 5 sites in the water, they never formed into waves or crept up upon the shore more than a few inches. Even then, they formed a single straight line when they inched up onto the shoreline. What I was witnessing was a rather violent event. From beneath each of the 5 areas, a pointed mass began to emerge from the water. They weren't all the same size, the one to the farthest right being the largest. Each of these forms resembled quickly forming volcanoes or mountains. Each emerged from the water at the same time and at the same speed. So this was ongoing, another phenomenon. As this was ongoing, another phenomenon began. This was something I'd seen a long time ago, although in an entirely different setting and in entirely different circumstances. But thousands of hailstones began falling from the sky. And the sky was clear, brilliant blue in color, no clouds whatsoever. And the hailstones were of different sizes, some quite large, others pea-sized. There was one very obvious difference between these hailstones and the hailstones I'd seen long ago during that other journey. The hailstones that I was now seeing didn't resemble white balls of ice. These more resembled clear, round snowflake shapes, crystal clear but still having mass. And they not only fell onto the water surface, but also onto the shoreline, dunes, and all the way up to the base of where I sat. Although the hailstones didn't land directly on me, they fell to my left and right. The hailstones that fell to the water plopped into the water and disappeared, And the hailstones that landed on the shoreline, dunes, and up to and around where I was sitting landed without making a sound, the smallest causing no disturbance in the sand and the largest causing minimal movement or indentions in the sand. Many of the thousands of stones dissolved when they landed in the sand. The smallest seemed to vaporize even before they landed, and many large stones dissolved into the sand, essentially merging with the sand. It's important to note that the hailstones that dissolved into the sand didn't melt. They didn't cause the sand to become wet. So as I was witnessing all of this, the emerging land masses, the ripples that converged, the effects of the hailstones on the water and land, the sound, each tiny detail, Raphael spoke again. What do you not see? Raphael's question now resonated with me. I also knew that this question was the test he'd referred to earlier, though I thought that was said in jest, because Raphael also has a wonderful sense of humor, which, by the way, with divine essences, they approach you in a way that makes you comfortable. And with me, it's humor and music that Raphael speaks to me through most. I thought about the question. It was obvious that I couldn't physically see beneath the water or the sand. But non-physically, I saw everything. I was able to see the chaotic force of the uprising land that emerged from the seafloor, or a humongous lake form. I could see the hailstones as they sank into the water, some falling deep into the water, others merging with the water and becoming part of the current, their ripples converging with the ripples of the emerging landforms. Even the snowflake shapes within the hailstones that fell on land were visible, each uniquely different. And as I became more aware of what I was able to see non-physically, Jibrail spoke as if he knew I'd come to a realization of some sort, because they're good that way. Your purpose is in that which you are witnessing. And when he said the word purpose, he said it in a shorter, slightly louder tone of voice. Remarkably, I understood what Gabriel meant. The seen, the unseen, the chaos beneath the water, the dissolution of the falling hailstones, the violent emergence of the landforms that barely caused a disturbance on the water surface, all that's happening before me and to each side as far as I could see. It was all imagery and symbolism, and it made sense, and I didn't feel what I was seeing, at least not in a physical way. I felt what I was seeing in a way that resonated with me. It was the knowing, in quotes, it's the knowing that I've discussed with so many people, and that knowing was the answer to my question, what is my purpose? Yeshua again approached me, put his hand on my shoulder, and began to speak. His demeanor was calm and measured, always is. Presence was warm and inviting, as it always is. Yet what he said carried a lot of weight. His words were not sugar-coated, though. They weren't words anyone would necessarily even want to hear. He said, just as the sacred space is within you and not a physical manifestation, like still water is never still, so it is with what you refer to as your purpose. There is no single purpose, plan, or destiny. Everything, everywhere, seen and unseen, known and unknown, is literally in flux, constantly in motion. And I wondered where this was headed as Yeshua continued on, saying, in the vastness of all that is, you are a grain of sand on that shoreline. He kind of motioned to the shoreline. And there's one thing to consider, however. That grain of sand is unique. And without that one grain of sand, the balance between the shoreline and the ocean beyond it is altered. Now, that's really deep stuff. The balance being that one grain of sand causes the most minuscule difference in, say, the water level, whatever it may be, tiny grain of sand. That made sense somehow. But what Yeshua told me next was really kind of sobering. He said, you're going to have to choose your paths. Some of those choices will be misguided. Some of the paths will be difficult. Others are going to seem effortless. No matter the path you choose, the divine within will lead you to where you're meant to be when you're meant to be there. And I nodded with understanding, and then he kept on going and saying, as you walk any of the paths you've chosen, you'll encounter many others walking their own paths. Make no mistake, not everyone on those paths will embrace you. You'll be mocked, turned away, scorned. Some who you've long known will shun you, and many will reject the truth that stirs within themselves. You will at times feel alone, betrayed, abandoned, and filled with despair. That's a heck of a pep talk there. Welcome to Wrexham. So Yeshua's words were serious and not very encouraging, to say the least. Yet his tone and his demeanor prevented me from experiencing fear. I've never been fearful of any divine essences or shadow or elements of darkness. Gabriel, having stood silently during this whole time, looked straight ahead at the water. And when Yeshua paused, Gabriel said, You are not now, nor have you ever been alone, nor abandoned, and the sacred space within is home to the divine. You will know this when these moments arise. Trust in that which you know. Again, with knowing, not believing. Believing is very much different than knowing. Yeshua finished by saying balance requires both acceptance of truth and rejection of truth. Not everyone embraces truth, and as such, balance is maintained. That was a heavy sentence. This was Yeshua's way of saying that I will experience what I would consider to be failure at times, but ultimately those failures will help in regaining and maintaining balance. And basically, and this is the heavy part, basically not everyone can or even should be helped. I'm to use discernment, as we all are, at all times, and not become discouraged. Failure makes us stronger. Not everyone is ready to know truth. It does cause fear in a lot of people because it sometimes involves change. So it was with this realization that the drumming callback began. I remained seated for a moment as Yeshua, Jibrail, and Raphael stood by, placed a hand on my head, and they whispered something in unison, but I couldn't understand what they said. After that, I'm pulled upwards, not backwards this time, until I return to my physical form. So this journey meant a lot to me as far as what I'd always considered my sacred space to be, a safe space, place, I call it a launching pad, where I'd receive guidance. I know if I journey and I'm meant to go there for some reason, I'll end up there, and the new place being within me. So it's where I need it to be, where I want it to be, which is what we all have within us. There is a sacred space we all have. And the reason I do these summaries for people is because every little detail within a summary or within a journey, I add to the summary because it's meant specifically for that individual. I do not add my own interpretations to things because it's not for me. My intention is for the other person. But there's always something to be learned that we all share because we're all connected. Even from this journey of mine, there's something that may resonate with someone out there. I use an example from a journey that I did for a lady several years ago and wrote the summary, and what blew me away was there was such a tiny detail. I thought nothing of it as I wrote it in the summary, of the way water flowed around rocks in the stream. And she burst into tears, and it meant so much to her. It helped her in her healing. So I want to thank you for listening to this, and I'm very interested to hear and get feedback about this journey summary that I just read and what may have resonated with you, the listener. Even the smallest step, the tiniest ripple, can make a huge impact, not only for yourself, but for others. That's what it's all about. It's connectedness. So I thank you for listening, and I do hope to hear from some of you out there. So be on the lookout very soon for summaries of journeys that I had taken very shortly after this one regarding my sacred space, but the next two will be on, first, the shadow, and second, the darkness, which is a little bit more intense. Still kind of tame compared to some of the ones that I have undertaken for other individuals in the last several years with different traumas. Until then, keep listening. I hope to have you back again, and peace. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Everyday Shaman. Please join me each week as we will explore new topics that I hope will inspire, educate, astound, and possibly confound listeners. If you have topic suggestions, if anything in this episode resonated with you, or you care to be a guest, I'd love to hear from you. You can contact me through my website, www.everydayshaman.net, or email me at jeffreybrunk@everydayshaman.net. You can also find my personal memoir, The Everyday Shaman, One Man's Journey into the Miraculous, on my website and on Amazon.com.